You've been handed a drink at a party and said no. And in that single second, the entire room shifted. Someone raised an eyebrow. Someone said, "Oh, come on, just one." Someone asked if you were pregnant. Someone made a joke you had to laugh off. And somewhere underneath all of that, you felt it. That familiar twinge of needing to explain yourself. To justify a choice that, when you think about it, shouldn't require any justification at all. Society has a lot of names for people like you. Boring, uptight, no fun, a killjoy. And here's the thing, nobody tells you. The people saying those things are often the most uncomfortable ones in the room. Not because of you, because of what your choice quietly reflects back at them. But today, I want to offer you a different perspective, one that is a little kinder and a lot more scientific, because what the research actually shows is that your relationship with alcohol, or rather your absence of one, reveals something deeply specific about how your brain is wired, your psychology, your values architecture, and in some cases, a cognitive profile that is statistically associated with higher self-awareness, higher emotional tolerance, and a more direct relationship with your own reality. You are not the problem at the party. You are the most interesting person there. Let's start by understanding why alcohol exists in culture at all. Because to understand the person who doesn't drink, we have to first understand what everyone else is doing and why. Human beings have used psychoactive substances for tens of thousands of years. Fermented beverages appear in the archaeological record across virtually every civilization. And for a long time, researchers assumed this was simply about pleasure or escape. But the deeper answer is more fascinating. Neuroscientists now describe alcohol as a social lubricant in the most literal neurochemical sense. It suppresses the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for self-monitoring, risk assessment, and social filtering. In other words, it chemically reduces the barrier between your internal world and your external expression. It makes you feel less watched, less judged, more fluid. For people who carry a high baseline level of social anxiety, which, research suggests, is a significant portion of the population, alcohol provides something they genuinely cannot access on their own: the feeling of being comfortable in their own skin in a crowd. This is why the phrase, "I need a drink," is not a figure of speech. For many people, it is a literal neurological prescription. And here's where it gets interesting for you, because there are exactly 3 psychological profiles that produce consistent, non-drinking behavior. And none of them are what the party crowd thinks they are. The first is what researchers call high baseline comfort. There is a subset of the population, studied extensively at the University of Toronto and later replicated in several European longitudinal studies, whose resting state of social ease is already high. Their prefrontal filtering isn't a barrier. It's simply how they operate. They don't experience the same friction in social settings that makes alcohol feel like relief, because they aren't starting from the same place of friction. Think of it this way. Alcohol is essentially a dimmer switch for the internal critic. For most people, that internal critic is running loud. The dimmer switch is genuinely useful. But if your internal critic is already quiet, or if you've built the neural architecture to manage it without chemical intervention, the dimmer switch doesn't offer anything you don't already have. You don't need to dim what isn't blinding you. Wild, right? The second profile is what psychologists call high interoceptive awareness. Interoception is your brain's ability to sense and interpret internal body signals, your heart rate, your gut, your emotional temperature. A 2019 paper published in the journal Frontiers in Psychology found that people with high interoceptive awareness are significantly more likely to be non-drinkers or light drinkers. And the mechanism is counterintuitive. It's not that they are afraid of losing control. It's that they are exquisitely tuned to their own internal environment. And alcohol feels disruptive to a system that is already running clearly. People with high interoceptive awareness often describe the sensation of being tipsy not as relaxing, but as static. Noise, an interruption of the signal they've learned to read and trust. Imagine having a finely calibrated instrument that you use to navigate your emotional world. Now imagine someone pouring something into it that makes the readings blur. That's not relief. That's interference. Here's the kicker. This same interoceptive sensitivity is consistently correlated with higher empathy scores, better emotional regulation, and stronger long-term decision-making. The very thing that makes alcohol feel unappealing to you is also the thing that makes you unusually good at reading a room, sustaining relationships, and knowing when something is wrong before anyone else does. The third profile is the most misunderstood. Researchers call it the reality preference orientation, though I think of it simply as choosing to stay inside your own experience rather than chemically editing it. A 2022 survey of non-drinkers conducted across 6 countries identified a consistent thread. These individuals reported a strong preference for experiences that felt authentically theirs, not altered, not enhanced. Theirs. This is not rigidity. This is not fear. It is a values architecture, a deeply held internal belief that consciousness is something to be inhabited, not adjusted. People in this category often describe their reason for not drinking in ways that sound almost philosophical. I want to feel what I actually feel. I want to remember everything. I don't want something else driving. These are not the words of someone who is missing out. These are the words of someone who is paying attention. And if you think about it through an evolutionary lens, if this orientation were truly maladaptive, if choosing sobriety really did make someone less fit to survive, less able to bond, less successful in navigating social hierarchies, natural selection would have pruned it out. But it didn't. Why? Because every tribe needs its sentinel, the one who doesn't lower their guard when the others do, the one who stays sharp when the party gets loud, the one who reads what everyone else is too chemically relaxed to notice. The tribe didn't just tolerate people like you. It depended on them. Now, I need to make space for a very important distinction here, because not everyone who doesn't drink is doing it from a place of strength. And getting honest about this is what separates insight from self-congratulation. Some people don't drink because they are in recovery, and that is not a weakness. That is one of the most demanding forms of self-knowledge a human being can practice. If that is your story, you don't need a reframe. You need recognition. What you are doing is neurologically and psychologically among the hardest things a person can sustain. Some people don't drink because of health conditions, medications, or religious commitments. These are valid, complete answers, and they need no psychological excavation. And some people, and this is the version worth sitting with, don't drink because they are using sobriety as a form of control in a life that feels out of control. The abstinence is real, but underneath it is anxiety, rigidity, a fear of losing the one thing they feel they can manage. So here is the self-diagnostic question. When you say no to a drink, does it feel like a free choice or like the only safe option? One is power. The other is armor. Only you know which one is true for you. Now, let's put this together into something you can actually use, because the challenge for people in this category isn't the drinking. It's the social friction, the explaining, the apologizing, the moments where you're handed a glass of something you don't want, and suddenly, the entire conversation becomes about you. Here's what I call the sober signal protocol. It has 3 moves. First, replace the explanation with the redirect. When someone asks why you're not drinking, you do not owe them your psychology, your history, or your values. You owe them only a warm sentence and a pivot. I'm good with this, and then ask them something about themselves. Most people asking are not actually curious about your reasons. They are uncomfortable with their own. Give them an exit. Second, find your social anchor. The research on non-drinkers in social settings consistently shows that the most comfortable ones have one thing in common: a role. They are the driver, the host, the photographer, the one who actually remembers the night and tells the stories later. A role is not a retreat. It is a way of being present on your own terms. Identify yours. Third, stop performing comfort you don't feel. If a setting genuinely doesn't work for you, if the entire architecture of the night is built around a substance you don't use, you are allowed to say so. Not as a judgment, as a preference. "That's not really my scene" is a complete sentence. You do not need to attend every event that was not designed with you in mind. Here's the reframe I want you to carry out of this. The world is full of people who need something external to feel present. You have built, or you were born with, the capacity to be present without it. That is not a limitation. That is not a deficiency. That is not something you need to fix, explain, or apologize for. It is, in the most precise psychological sense, a form of freedom. You are not the person who doesn't drink. You are the person who is already there. And if this channel is becoming part of how you think, subscribe. We're building something here.